10 Buddhist practices for self-discipline and happiness. What if I told you that nothing in life is good or bad, except for the way you choose to see it? Think about it. 2 people lose their jobs. One spirals into anger, blame, and hopelessness. The other sees it as a chance for reinvention, for something new. Same situation, completely different outcomes. Why? Because life doesn't happen to us. Life responds to us. The way you think, the lens through which you see the world, is what creates your reality. And here's the part most people don't realize. Your suffering isn't caused by events themselves. It's caused by your resistance to those events. Buddhism teaches this simple but powerful truth. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. If you can shift your perspective, you can shift your life. So today, we're talking about one of the most important skills you can ever master, your attitude. Because once you learn to see beyond struggles, once you stop fighting reality and start flowing with it, everything changes. Let's begin. 1. Master your attitude, the art of seeing beyond struggles. There was once a traveler who came across a river in the middle of his journey. The water was rough and there was no bridge to cross. Frustrated, he sat down, cursing his luck, wishing the river weren't there. Another traveler arrived moments later, observed the same river, and immediately began gathering wood to build a raft. By the end of the day, one traveler remained stuck, drowning in his complaints, while the other had already moved forward. The difference between them? Their attitude. Life is unpredictable. Some days feel like gentle breezes, others like raging storms. But the way we respond to difficulties determines whether we become victims of circumstances or architects of our own growth. Many believe that suffering comes from pain itself, but Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from resistance to pain. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. It is not what happens to us that defines our lives, but how we interpret and respond to it. There is an old story about a wise farmer who lived in a small village. One day, his only horse ran away. The neighbors came rushing to him, exclaiming, "What terrible misfortune!" The farmer simply shrugged and said, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, this time bringing several wild horses with it. The neighbors were ecstatic. "What great luck," they said. Again, the farmer replied, "Maybe." Soon after, while trying to tame one of the wild horses, the farmer's son fell and broke his leg. "Such misfortune," the neighbors said, shaking their heads. The farmer remained calm. "Maybe." A week later, soldiers arrived at the village, drafting all able-bodied young men for war. The farmer's son, because of his broken leg, was spared. What seems bad today may be a blessing tomorrow. What seems like a blessing today may bring challenges later. The problem is, we often judge life too quickly. We label events as good or bad based on immediate emotions, not realizing that we are only seeing one piece of the story. A resilient attitude does not mean pretending that pain doesn't exist. It means learning to bend with the wind, like bamboo in a storm, instead of resisting and breaking. Think about the last time you faced something difficult. Was the situation itself unbearable, or was it the way your mind reacted to it? We spend so much energy wishing things were different, replaying past mistakes, fearing the future. But what if we accepted what we cannot control and focused on what we can? A Zen master once said, "You are not punished for your anger. You are punished by your anger." The same is true for fear, resentment, and self-doubt. The way we see the world creates the world we experience. Imagine carrying a heavy rock everywhere you go. At first, you curse the weight of it. Then you grow tired, but still you refuse to let go. Eventually, you start to believe that the rock is part of you. This is what we do with our struggles. We hold on to pain, regret, and negativity, not realizing that we have the power to set them down at any moment. The moment we shift our perspective, we shift our reality. There is another story of a man who went to see a wise monk. "I am tired of suffering," he said. The monk took a handful of salt and dropped it into a glass of water. "Drink," he said. The man took a sip and immediately spat it out. "It's too salty," he said. The monk then took the same handful of salt and threw it into a large lake. "Now drink," he said. The man hesitated, but when he tasted the water, it was fresh. "The salt is the same," the monk said, "but the difference is in how much space you allow it to take up in your life. If your mind is small like the glass, even a little suffering will consume you. But if your mind is vast like the lake, no suffering will overwhelm you." This is the power of perspective. When we hold on to struggles tightly, they dominate our lives. But when we expand our minds, challenges become smaller in comparison to the vastness of all we still have. A negative mind is its own prison. When we see life through frustration and fear, everything appears as an enemy. But when we choose to approach each moment with an open heart, even failures become lessons, even rejections become redirections. A single candle can light 1,000 others without losing its own flame. The same is true of a positive attitude. It spreads, lifting not only ourselves but those around us. Imagine walking into a room filled with darkness. You can either curse the darkness or light a small flame. The choice is always ours. If you woke up tomorrow and decided to see every challenge as an opportunity, how different would your life feel? The world does not change, but the way we see it can. So, the next time life presents you with something unexpected, take a breath and ask yourself, is this really misfortune? Or is it simply too soon to see the bigger picture? 2. Improve communication words as bridges, not walls. There was once a traveler who reached a village at the foot of a mountain. He saw an old man sitting quietly under a tree and asked, "Sir, what kind of people live in this village?" The old man looked at him and replied, "What kind of people lived in the village you came from?" The traveler frowned. "Oh, they were rude, selfish, and unkind. That's why I left." The old man sighed. "You will find the same people here." A few hours later, another traveler arrived and asked the same question. "What kind of people live in this village?" The old man once again replied, "What kind of people lived in the village you came from?" The traveler smiled. "They were kind, generous, and always willing to help." The old man nodded. "You will find the same people here." A young boy nearby, who had overheard both conversations, was confused. He turned to the old man and asked, "Why did you give them different answers?" The old man smiled. "Because the way we see others is shaped by the way we speak and listen. If we assume the worst, we will always find it. If we expect kindness, we will see it." Communication isn't just about words. It's about perception. How often do we speak without thinking? How often do we listen without truly understanding? Words have the power to build bridges or create walls. They can connect hearts or drive people apart. A single careless word can wound deeper than a blade, while a single kind word can heal wounds unseen. Buddhism teaches the principle of right speech, speaking with truth, kindness, and purpose. But in today's world, communication is often rushed, filled with misunderstandings, distractions, and unnecessary arguments. A man once complained to a monk, "My wife never understands me. No matter what I say, she always takes it the wrong way." The monk handed him a bowl of still water. "Stir it," he said. The man did, watching as ripples spread across the surface. "Now look into the water," the monk said. The man peered into the bowl, but his reflection was distorted. The monk smiled. "Your words stir emotions, just like your hands stirred the water. When you speak in frustration, the conversation becomes cloudy. But when you allow stillness, understanding becomes clear." We often assume communication is about speaking, but in truth, it is about listening. Not just hearing words, but truly listening with the intent to understand, not just to reply. Imagine a conversation where two people are arguing. They aren't actually listening to each other. They are waiting for their turn to speak. Instead of absorbing what the other person is saying, they are mentally preparing their response. But what if, just for a moment, we paused? What if, instead of reacting, we took a deep breath? What if, instead of speaking to win an argument, we spoke to connect? There is a saying, "Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates." Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Many conflicts could be avoided if we took just a second to reflect before speaking. But in a world of instant reactions, we forget the power of silence. Silence is not just the absence of words, it is the presence of understanding. There is a story of a king who had 3 sons. Wanting to test their wisdom, he gave each of them a candle and said, "Go into the darkest cave and light this candle. Whoever makes the cave brightest will be my heir." The first son lit many candles, filling the cave with light. The second son brought mirrors to reflect the light, making it even brighter. But the third son simply stood still. Confused, the king asked, "Why have you not lit your candle?" The third son replied, "Father, light can only be understood in the presence of darkness, just as words have meaning only in the presence of silence. Sometimes the brightest thing we can do is to be still. A well-timed silence can prevent a lifetime of regret. A pause before responding can mean the difference between an argument and an understanding. But silence is not just about withholding words, it is about creating space for real connection. A teacher once asked a student, "What is the most important part of a drum?" The student thought for a moment and said, "The wood." The teacher shook his head. "No, it's the empty space inside. Without it, there would be no sound." Just as a drum needs space to create music, a conversation needs silence to create meaning. But beyond words and silence, communication is also about energy. Have you ever walked into a room where 2 people just had an argument? Even if they are silent, you can feel the tension in the air. This is because communication is not just about words, it is about presence. If you enter a conversation with anger, even your softest words will feel like an attack. But if you enter with calmness, even difficult conversations can be softened. A single kind word can change someone's day. A moment of patience can prevent years of regret. There was once a man who had a terrible temper. He would often say hurtful things in anger, only to regret them later. One day, an elder gave him a bag of nails and told him, "Every time you say something unkind, hammer a nail into this fence." At first, the man hammered nails constantly. But as he became aware of his words, he began to control his temper. Eventually, he stopped kneading the nails altogether. The elder then said, "Now pull out each nail." The man did. When he finished, the elder pointed at the fence. "Look at the holes left behind. Words can be removed, but their impact remains." What if we treated every conversation as an opportunity to plant seeds of kindness instead of leaving scars? What if we used words not to harm, but to heal? The quality of our relationships is shaped by the way we communicate. Every time we speak, we are building a bridge or erecting a wall. The choice is always ours. So, before your next conversation, take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I about to build a bridge, or am I about to build a wall? 3. Strengthen self-discipline, the foundation of freedom. Most people hear the word discipline and immediately associate it with restriction, sacrifice, or even punishment. It feels like a force that takes away freedom, forcing us to follow rigid rules, denying us the pleasures of life. But in reality, true discipline is not about control, it's about liberation. Think about it. When you lack discipline, you react to life instead of creating it. You hit the snooze button, you procrastinate, you indulge in distractions, you avoid discomfort. You let emotions and impulses dictate your choices, often leading to regret. But when you cultivate discipline, you regain control over your life. You become the driver, not just a passenger. Buddhism teaches that self-discipline is not about denying yourself joy. It's about freeing yourself from the habits and desires that lead to suffering. It is about learning to distinguish between fleeting pleasure and lasting fulfillment. There's a famous story about a man who came to the Buddha seeking peace. "I want peace," he said. The Buddha smiled and responded, "Remove I. That is ego. Remove want. That is attachment. What remains is peace." This simple yet profound teaching reminds us that much of our inner turmoil comes from attachment. Attachment to desires, to comfort, to avoidance of pain. And discipline is the tool that helps us loosen these attachments, allowing us to experience real freedom. Think about an artist who wants to paint a masterpiece. If they simply splash colors randomly, hoping something beautiful will emerge, they might get lucky once in a while. But a true artist masters their craft through discipline, through steady practice, through learning techniques, through honing their skills. Only by committing to the process do they gain the freedom to create something extraordinary. The same applies to life. Without discipline, your potential remains untapped. Your energy gets scattered. Your dreams stay just that, dreams. But when you cultivate self-discipline, you shape your life with intention and purpose. There's a powerful analogy in Buddhism about the wild horse and the skilled rider. Imagine your mind is like a wild, untamed horse. If left uncontrolled, it runs in all directions, dragging you along, causing chaos and exhaustion. But with discipline, you learn to guide it, to direct its energy where you choose. You don't break the horse, you train it. You develop a partnership. And through that mastery, you gain the ability to go anywhere you desire. This is the essence of self-discipline. It is not about suppressing your mind, your desires, or your emotions. It is about training them to work in harmony with your higher purpose. Imagine waking up in the morning. You have a choice. Do you immediately check your phone, getting lost in social media, emails, and distractions? Or do you take a moment of stillness, set an intention, and start your day with purpose? Do you let cravings dictate your eating habits, consuming whatever is convenient? Or do you practice mindful nourishment, respecting your body and making choices that sustain your energy? Do you let emotions dictate your reactions, getting angry, frustrated, or impatient at every inconvenience? Or do you practice emotional discipline, pausing before reacting, choosing a response that aligns with the person you want to become? These small choices shape the course of your life. There is an old Zen teaching: you are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. What you do every single day matters far more than what you do once in a while. If you wait for motivation, you'll always be at the mercy of how you feel. But if you rely on discipline, you become unstoppable. Because discipline means you show up even when you don't feel like it. It means you stay committed even when it's hard. Discipline is what turns an average person into a master. A writer becomes great not because of a single moment of inspiration, but because they write every day. A musician doesn't become skilled by picking up their instrument once a month, but by practicing with consistency. And here's something interesting: discipline is not just about effort. It is about alignment. When you are disciplined in something you truly care about, it doesn't feel like suffering. It feels like devotion. Think of a monk who wakes up before dawn to meditate. To an outsider, this might seem like sacrifice. But to the monk, this is freedom, because their discipline allows them to experience deep peace. Think of an athlete who trains rigorously every day. To most, this might seem exhausting. But to them, it is empowering because their discipline allows them to achieve their highest potential. Self-discipline is not about deprivation. It is about choosing what matters most over what is easiest in the moment. Of course, discipline is not something you master overnight. It is a practice. And like any practice, you begin small. Picking one small habit, waking up on time, avoiding distractions, or practicing patience, can be the foundation for profound change. The key is not to aim for perfection, but to build consistency. Just like a river shapes the landscape over time, discipline reshapes your life in ways that seem small at first, but become transformational in the long run. There is a reason why in many Buddhist traditions, monks follow a strict daily routine. It is not because they are forced to, but because they understand that discipline creates the conditions for wisdom and peace to flourish. There's another teaching in Buddhism that says, "Rule your mind, or it will rule you." If you do not take control of your thoughts, habits, and actions, they will take control of you. The question is, are you willing to trade temporary comfort for long-term fulfillment? Because the truth is, every time you choose discipline, you are choosing your future self. Imagine looking back on your life 10 years from now. Will you be grateful for the small, disciplined choices you made today? Or will you wish you had started sooner? The decision is always in your hands. Shift your mindset, your thoughts create your reality. There was once a traveler who arrived in a village after a long and exhausting journey. He approached a group of villagers and asked, "What kind of people live here?" An old man, sitting quietly under a tree, responded with a question of his own. What kind of people lived in the place you came from? The traveler sighed, shaking his head. Oh, they were selfish, dishonest, and unkind. That's why I left. The old man nodded slowly. You will find the same people here, he said. Disappointed, the traveler moved on. Not long after, another traveler arrived in the village and asked the same question. What kind of people live here? Again, the old man asked, what kind of people lived where you came from? This traveler smiled. Oh, they were kind, generous, and always willing to help one another. The old man nodded again. You will find the same people here, he said. A boy who had been sitting nearby, watching the exchange, turned to the old man in confusion. Why did you give two different answers? The old man smiled. Because people do not see the world as it is. They see it as they are. Our thoughts shape our reality. If we focus on negativity, we will find it everywhere. If we look for goodness, we will see it even in the most unexpected places. The world around us is often a mirror, reflecting back what we choose to believe. Buddhism teaches that our suffering does not come from external events, but from the stories we tell ourselves about those events. If our minds are filled with scarcity, self-doubt, and fear, we will always see obstacles. But if we train our minds to see abundance, opportunity, and gratitude, then even in difficult times, we will find growth. A student once approached a wise monk and said, My life is full of problems. No matter what I do, I feel like nothing ever goes my way. The monk listened, then picked up a teapot and began pouring tea into a cup. Slowly, the tea rose to the brim, but the monk kept pouring until the cup overflowed and spilled onto the floor. Why are you doing that? The student asked. The cup is full. The monk looked at him and said, Like this cup, your mind is already full of doubt, full of negativity, full of things you think you already know. How can you receive wisdom if there is no space for it? Empty your cup first. How many of us are walking around with minds overflowing with limiting beliefs? We say things like, I'm not good enough. Life is unfair. Things never work out for me. But what if we could change the story? What if, instead of saying, I can't do this, we asked, what can I learn from this? What if, instead of seeing failure as the end, we saw it as a stepping stone? There's a story of an old farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors came rushing to him, saying, What bad luck! The farmer simply replied, Maybe. A few days later, the horse returned, bringing several wild horses with it. The neighbors exclaimed, How lucky you are! Again, the farmer only said, Maybe. Later, his son was thrown off one of the wild horses and broke his leg. The neighbors shook their heads. Such misfortune. The farmer, as always, responded, Maybe. A week later, soldiers came to the village, taking every able-bodied young man to fight in the war. The farmer's son, because of his broken leg, was spared. Life isn't about what happens to us. It's about how we interpret it. What seems like a disaster today may turn out to be a blessing tomorrow. There's a powerful Buddhist teaching that says, if you want to see your past, look at your present. If you want to see your future, look at your thoughts now. If your mind is filled with fear, anger, or resentment, you will always find reasons to confirm those emotions. But if your mind is trained to see gratitude, even the hardest days will contain something beautiful. Imagine two wolves fighting inside you. One represents fear, doubt, and negativity. The other represents courage, love, and wisdom. Which one wins? The one you feed the most. So the next time you catch yourself repeating a negative thought, pause and ask, would I choose to believe this if I knew it would shape my reality? If the answer is no, let it go. Your thoughts are not just random things passing through your mind. They are the foundation of your reality. And the most beautiful part? You get to choose them. 5. Optimize your time. Every moment matters. There's a story of a man who walked into a marketplace and saw Death standing in the crowd. Shocked, the man ran up to Death and asked, "Are you here for me?" Death shook his head. "No, but I will see you in another city tomorrow." Terrified, the man rushed home, packed his bags, and traveled as far away as he could, to a city miles away. When he arrived, he sighed in relief, until he turned and saw death standing there, waiting for him. With wide eyes, the man gasped, "How did you get here before me?" Death smiled and said, "I was always meeting you here. You were the one who thought you had more time. Most of us live as if we have unlimited time, but deep down, we know that's not true. We see the years pass, we watch loved ones age, we look in the mirror and realize we are not who we once were. Yet, we still act as if we have forever." A man once asked a Buddhist master, "What is the greatest illusion in life?" The master replied, "That you think you have time. We delay the things that matter, believing we will always have another day, another week, another year. We say, 'One day, I'll follow my passion. One day, I'll spend more time with my family. One day, I'll start taking care of myself.' But one day never comes, because time does not wait. Imagine waking up every morning with $86,400 in your bank account. At the end of the day, whatever you didn't spend disappears. Would you waste it? Would you let others take it from you? Now replace dollars with seconds, because that's exactly what's happening every single day. Yet, so many of us spend our time scrolling through distractions, procrastinating on things that actually matter, saying yes to obligations that drain us. The wise do something different. Instead of saying, "I don't have time," they ask, "How am I using my time?" Instead of being busy, they are purposeful. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, they act now. If time is your most valuable currency, are you spending it wisely? Imagine if you had only 1 year left to live. What would suddenly become important? Would you waste time on mindless distractions? Or would you pour yourself into what truly matters? Would you let small inconveniences steal your peace? Or would you embrace each moment with gratitude? Would you hold back on telling people you love them? Or would you make sure they knew every single day? The days are long, but the years are short. The life you dream of is built not in the future, but in the small choices you make today. What will you choose to do with this moment? 6. Grow your knowledge, seek wisdom, not just information. There was once a young man who traveled far and wide, searching for wisdom. He read every book he could find, memorized countless teachings, and attended lectures by the most renowned scholars. Yet, despite all his knowledge, he felt something was missing. One day, he heard of a great master who lived high in the mountains. Determined to seek the truth, he made the long and difficult journey. When he finally arrived, exhausted but eager, he bowed before the master and said, "Teach me everything you know. My mind is ready to receive." The master smiled and handed him a bowl. Then, he picked up a kettle and began to pour tea into the young man's bowl. Slowly at first, then more and more, until the tea spilled over, cascading onto the floor. "Stop! The bowl is full!" the young man exclaimed. The master set down the kettle and looked at him. "Exactly," he said. "You came here seeking wisdom, but your mind is already full of opinions, assumptions, and the belief that you already understand. How can you gain true wisdom if there is no space for it? First, empty your bowl." How often do we do the same? We consume endless amounts of information. Books, podcasts, social media, news, but do we truly absorb wisdom? Or do we simply collect knowledge without ever living it? We live in a world overflowing with information. With a few taps on a screen, we can access more facts than any generation before us. But facts alone do not make us wise. Knowledge is like gathering wood for a fire, useless unless it is ignited into warmth, light, and action. True wisdom doesn't come from memorizing information. It comes from understanding, experience, and application. You can read about patience 1,000 times, but until you've practiced it in a moment of anger, you don't truly know it. You can study kindness, but unless you've chosen compassion in a difficult moment, it remains just a theory. A wise farmer once said, "You don't truly know the taste of salt until you've felt it on your tongue." Similarly, you don't know something until you've lived it. Think of the difference between a man who has read about swimming and a man who has actually swum. One can recite theories about water resistance and buoyancy, but the other knows the feeling of water against his skin, the rhythm of his breath as he moves. The second man has lived knowledge, and that is what transforms learning into wisdom. So why do so many people collect knowledge but never apply it? Because application requires effort. It is easy to read about mindfulness, but much harder to sit in stillness and actually practice it. It is easy to talk about discipline, but much harder to wake up at dawn and commit to daily habits. But knowledge without application is like owning a lantern but never lighting it. It may look impressive on the shelf, but it will never guide you through the darkness. The real question is, how are you using what you learn? Next time you read something valuable, don't just think, "That's interesting." Instead, ask yourself, how can I apply this today? If knowledge stays in your mind but never reaches your hands, your heart, or your actions, it remains incomplete. There's an old saying, a single lesson practiced is worth more than 100 books read. What's one piece of wisdom you've learned that you haven't yet applied? And what will you do with it today? 7. Improve financial habits, freedom, not just wealth. There was once a wealthy merchant who had everything a man could desire: gold, land, fine clothing, and a house filled with treasures. He was admired and envied by many, for he had built an empire through hard work and clever business dealings. One day, a humble monk came to visit him. The merchant, proud of his success, took the monk on a grand tour of his estate, showing off his wealth. "Look at all I have built. I have more than enough for 100 lifetimes." The monk smiled and asked, "If all of this disappeared tomorrow, would you still have peace?" The merchant fell silent. He had never considered this before. He realized that, despite all his riches, he was never truly at peace. He worried constantly about losing what he had, about competitors, about theft, about the economy. No amount of wealth had freed him from his anxieties. This story is a reminder that money itself is not wealth, freedom is. Many people chase financial success, believing it will bring them happiness, yet they remain trapped in fear, greed, or stress. Others, with far less, walk through life with a light heart and a deep sense of peace. So what is true wealth? Buddhism teaches contentment and mindful stewardship, not rejecting money, but mastering it rather than letting it master you. Money should be a tool, not a burden. It should provide security, not anxiety. It should serve you, not own you. A man once asked a Zen master, "What is the secret to a peaceful life?" The master replied, "Have little desire." This doesn't mean you shouldn't work hard or seek financial security. It means understanding that money should support your life, not define it. There are people with millions in the bank who still feel like they never have enough. And there are people with modest means who live with abundance because they are grateful for what they have. The key is to develop healthy financial habits that bring true security, not just external wealth, but internal stability. Many people spend unconsciously, using money to fill emotional voids rather than to create real value. They buy things to impress others, to feel worthy, to distract from deeper discomfort. But mindful financial habits lead to freedom, not just in wealth but in peace of mind. There's an old saying, "A rich man is not one who has the most, but one who needs the least." So how can we practice financial wisdom in a way that aligns with peace and contentment? One of the simplest yet most powerful practices is awareness. If you want to transform your relationship with money, start by tracking your spending. Just for a week, observe where your money goes, not to judge, but to understand. When you see where your money flows, you begin to see where your energy flows. Are you spending on things that bring true value? Or are you letting unconscious habits dictate your finances? Another powerful shift is practicing delayed gratification. Many times, what we think we need is actually just a fleeting desire. If you feel the impulse to buy something, wait a day. If after 24 hours you still feel it is important, then consider it. But more often than not, you will realize you never really needed it in the first place. Buddhist teachings emphasize living with intention, whether in our speech, our actions, or even our financial choices. True wealth is not measured by how much you have, but by how little you need. What's one financial habit you can shift today? Not just to accumulate more, but to create more peace, more freedom, and more alignment with what truly matters. 8. Commit to personal growth, embrace discomfort. There was once a young disciple who came to his master, frustrated with the struggles of his journey. "Why is growth so painful?" he asked. The master smiled and handed him a small clay pot. "If a seed stays safe inside this pot forever, it will never become a tree," he said. The disciple looked at the pot, confused. The master continued, "For the seed to grow, it must break open, push through the dirt, endure storms, and stretch toward the sun. Only through that struggle can it become something greater." We all want growth, but few of us want the discomfort that comes with it. We want wisdom without failure, strength without struggle, transformation without challenge. But just like a butterfly must fight its way out of its cocoon to strengthen its wings, or a tree must push through the soil to reach the light, growth requires discomfort. There is an old tale about a man who found a butterfly struggling to emerge from its cocoon. Wanting to help, he carefully cut the cocoon open. But instead of flying, the butterfly fell to the ground. Its wings, weak and underdeveloped, were unable to support it. What the man didn't realize was that the struggle to break free was what gave the butterfly its strength. By removing the hardship, he had taken away its ability to fly. How often do we do the same in our own lives? We resist discomfort, avoid difficult conversations, fear failure, and seek the easiest path. But by doing so, we rob ourselves of the strength that only struggle can provide. Growth is uncomfortable because it forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that we would rather ignore. It challenges our beliefs, stretches our limits, and pushes us beyond what feels safe. But what if the very things we fear, the failures, the hardships, the struggles, are actually guiding us toward who we are meant to become? A river does not carve through rock because of its force, but because of its persistence. Every drop of water, every moment of pressure, slowly shapes the landscape. Personal growth works the same way. It's not about massive leaps overnight, but about choosing to step into discomfort again and again until transformation becomes inevitable. The great poet Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." What if we stopped resisting growth and instead embraced it? What if we saw each challenge as an invitation rather than an obstacle? Instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me?" we could ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" Instead of fearing failure, we could recognize that failure is not the opposite of growth. It is part of it. A sword is not made strong by resting in comfort. It is forged in fire, shaped by pressure, and refined through challenge. Likewise, our greatest strength comes from the moments that test us the most. So the real question is, what discomfort are you avoiding that might actually be the key to your next level of growth? 9. Align with your purpose, live with intention. There was once a young seeker who traveled across mountains and valleys, searching for his life's purpose. He met scholars, studied ancient texts, and meditated in solitude, but still he felt lost. One day, he approached a Zen master and asked, "How do I find my purpose?" The master smiled. "Live every small moment with mindfulness, and your purpose will reveal itself." The seeker was confused. "But shouldn't I search for something greater?" The master shook his head. "Purpose is not something you find out there. It is something you create in here." So many of us believe that purpose is a grand destination waiting to be discovered. Some hidden truth that, once found, will suddenly make everything clear. But the truth is, purpose is not a distant treasure. It is woven into the fabric of our everyday choices. A river does not question its path. It simply flows, shaping the land as it moves. Your purpose is the same. It is not something to chase. It is something to live moment by moment through the way you show up in the world. There is an old saying, "The meaning of life is not to find yourself. It is to create yourself." How do we create purpose? By bringing intention into what we already do. A teacher who sees their job as just a way to earn money may feel empty. But a teacher who views their work as shaping the minds of the next generation will find deep fulfillment. A musician who plays only for fame may struggle with dissatisfaction. But one who plays because music speaks to the soul will always feel connected to their craft. Your purpose is not one single thing. It is not a title, a job, or a role. It is the energy you bring into everything you do. Instead of asking, "What is my purpose?" ask, "What am I doing with purpose today?" The people who feel most lost are often the ones waiting for purpose to be handed to them. But purpose is not found in waiting, it is found in doing. A tree does not sit and wonder, "Should I grow?" It simply grows, stretching toward the sun, fulfilling its purpose just by being fully itself. You do not need to have everything figured out to live with intention. You only need to ask yourself, what brings me joy? What makes me feel alive? How can I serve others with what I have? Your answers may not be grand or life-changing. They may be simple, a love for creating, a desire to help, a need to express. But in those small moments of clarity, purpose begins to take shape. The truth is, your purpose is already within you. It is not waiting in the future. It is here, in this moment, in the way you speak, listen, create, and love. So what will you do today, not tomorrow, not next year, but today, to live with more intention? 10. Practice gratitude, the key to happiness. There was once a blind man who sat on the steps of a temple, holding a sign that read, "I am blind. Please help." Many people passed by, but only a few dropped coins into his cup. One day, a kind monk stopped and looked at the sign. He picked it up, turned it over, and wrote something new before placing it back beside the man. By the afternoon, something strange happened. People who had previously walked past without a second glance now stopped, read the sign, and gave generously. The blind man, surprised by the sudden change, asked the monk what he had written. The monk smiled and said, "I wrote, 'It is a beautiful day, and I cannot see it.'" Nothing about the man's condition had changed, but the perspective had. Instead of focusing on what he lacked, the new message reminded others of what they had. A gift so simple, yet often taken for granted. Gratitude is not about pretending life is perfect. It is not about ignoring pain or denying struggles. It is about choosing to see the beauty in what is already present, rather than focusing on what is missing. Many of us spend our days waiting for happiness to arrive. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll be happy when I find the right person. I'll be happy when I have more money, more time, a different life. But this mindset creates an endless cycle, because as soon as one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place. The mind always finds something else to chase, another reason to postpone joy. There is a story of a poor man who lived in a small, crowded house with his wife, children, and in-laws. Every day he complained about the noise, the lack of space, the chaos. One day, desperate for peace, he went to a wise old man for advice. The old man listened and said, "Bring your goat inside the house." The poor man was confused but did as he was told. That night, the house was even more crowded, noisy, and unbearable. The next day, he returned to the old man and said, "This is worse than before." The old man nodded. "Now bring your chickens inside as well." The man, though reluctant, obeyed. The house became even more chaotic. Days later, he returned, desperate. "I can't live like this," he cried. The old man smiled and said, "Now take all the animals out." That night, as the man sat in his now quiet home, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace and gratitude. Nothing had changed except his perspective. When we constantly focus on what we don't have, we suffer. But when we take a step back, we begin to realize how much we already do have. There is an old Buddhist saying, "Let us rise up and be thankful, for if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. If we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. If we did get sick, at least we didn't die. So, let us all be thankful." Gratitude shifts our minds from scarcity to abundance. Instead of seeing life through a lens of lack, we begin to see the quiet miracles happening around us every day. A warm meal, a kind word, a deep breath, a sunset, the ability to read these words. These are not small things. These are life itself. But gratitude is not something that happens automatically. It is a practice, something we must cultivate intentionally, just like strength, patience, or wisdom. One of the simplest and most powerful ways to do this is through writing down 3 things you're grateful for every day. At first, it might feel repetitive, but over time, this practice rewires the brain. It trains the mind to look for the good, even on difficult days. Imagine waking up each morning and, instead of thinking about what you lack, you begin the day with a quiet acknowledgement of what you have. Imagine if, before every meal, instead of mindlessly eating, you paused for a moment and thought, "How lucky I am to have this food in front of me." Imagine if, in moments of stress, instead of spiraling into frustration, you took a deep breath and found one small thing to be grateful for. The truth is, no matter where we are in life, there is always something to appreciate. The question is, are we paying attention? There's a moment in every challenge where you get to decide, will this break me or will this build me? The story of the wise farmer reminds us that what feels like bad luck today may turn out to be a blessing tomorrow. The story of the monk and the salt teaches us that pain is only as big as the space we allow it to take up in our minds. And the story of the 2 travelers at the river shows us that it's not the obstacles that hold us back. It's the way we respond to them. So take a moment to reflect. Are you fighting life, or are you flowing with it? Are you labeling events too quickly, calling them bad before you've seen the bigger picture? What if, just for today, you chose to see everything as happening for you instead of happening to you? Because the truth is, the world doesn't change, but the way you see it can. And when you change the way you see the world you see changes too. So, the next time life throws something unexpected your way, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, is this really a setback? Or is it simply too soon to understand the lesson? You are the artist of your life. The brush is in your hand. What will you paint today? And if this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share and subscribe, because wisdom, like a candle, only grows brighter when it is shared. Now, let me ask you, what's one challenge in your life that, looking back, turned out to be a gift in disguise? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and keep walking your path with strength and an open heart.